Hi, this is Greg Kilstrom. Welcome to Season 3 of The Agile World, where we discuss customer and employee experience, organizational and workforce transformation, and how business can adapt and continually improve in an agile age. The Agile World podcast is brought to you by TEKsystems, an industry leader in full-stack technology services, talent services, and real-world application. For more information, go to teksystems.com. To read more about the topics discussed in this show, you can go to my website at theagile.world and read my latest articles, or get a copy of my latest book, The Agile Workforce, now available on Amazon and other retailers. My name is Greg Kilstrom, and I'm the host of the Agile World podcast. Welcome to a special episode of the show brought to you in partnership with Arlington Economic Development, where we discuss issues related to the workforce, the role of place in the future of work, and more. We call this Return on Creativity. Today, we're going to talk about the increased demand for a diverse workforce and how STEM skills are and will continue to be in demand. To prepare the future workforce, it's good to start young and to ensure that all children, particularly those less likely to participate in STEM, are able to. To help me discuss this topic, I'd like to welcome Brittany Greer, Executive Director of Rosie Riveters. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So what you're doing is really exciting, and I've heard a bit about it, but really excited for you to share this with my audience. And so I'd like to just start by talking about Rosie Riveters. So why don't you start by just talking a little bit about the mission and what you're aiming to accomplish?
Yeah, absolutely. So Rosie Riveters, our goal is to start young in terms of early engagement. Our goal is to equip and empower girls from preschool, right, as early as we can get them in a classroom setting, through middle school, from diverse backgrounds, to be confident, strong, and competent in the fields of science, technology, engineering, and math, or STEM, as we've all come to know and love it today. But really providing a space where they're going to have the opportunity to imagine, learn, play, and really build their confidence in these fields as they navigate kind of the what's discussed often as this pipeline into STEM careers. So kind of the journey from cradle to career and then remaining there. We're not only looking to give them their own space within that world, but also the confidence and the tools they will need to navigate the kind of barriers that are currently in place along the way.
That's great. And I think just overall, this program is unique and much needed. But what have you done to further make the programming and focus unique? And I guess follow up to that, why don't you think there's more programs like it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so in terms of our approach, we do start really young. We start at 4, and most programs are not interacting at that stage, particularly not in the nonprofit space. There's some for-profit, you can find like a STEM preschool here and there, but in terms of just kind of community outreach, there's not much in terms of really early engagement, because you think of STEM and you think of this kind of complex thought pattern or whatever kind of your existing stereotype is with it. And the reality is those skills are things that you start to kind of associate with, your own ownership of a field at a really young age. And so there's a lot of programming out there that starts at middle school, maybe a little bit before then, but predominantly middle school, and kind of engages upwards from there. But there's not much within kind of that early elementary space. And what we're looking to do through our curriculum and our approach of that early engagement is start to intervene at a time when girls are starting to kind of hardwire their relationships to learning, starting to establish the way that they approach new subjects. And we're really looking at developing critical thinking and problem solving skills, but ultimately the confidence to be comfortable in a subject that you might not be familiar with. And I could talk about pedagogy backwards, forwards, and in between as to why that is, but it's a space where girls tend to excel early in their education careers on a whole. And they start to cement the relationship of getting things correct pretty quickly with success or intelligence, as opposed to being in a space where it's okay if you don't know the answer. It's okay if you've never done this before. Like, I don't expect you to walk into calculus and get it, right? So starting to really kind of establish comfort in discomfort with learning, and knowing that we can find the space to also help you self-advocate for your own way of learning, because everybody learns differently and everybody starts as a beginner, but really giving the girls the space to have the confidence to say, hey, this is what I need to get this subject, or this is what I need to, to be comfortable in this space, so that they know that if they walk into something and it doesn't click the first time or the second time or the third time, they're gonna get to an answer. Because if you can say to yourself, I may not know, but I know I can figure it out, that's confidence that goes, far beyond anything that I can even do in a classroom with them.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that I'm going to ask you a follow up on the confidence thing, because honestly, I think that's something that, I mean, adults that are, decades or more into their career need as well, and so important, and so great that you're teaching people at a young age to do that. Can you talk a little bit about what's the approach, and how do you approach kind of getting people out of their comfort zone, and especially kids that are, they're learning new things, and stuff like that.
Yeah, so it's very much hands-on learning, and our curriculum is designed so that they're gonna be out of their comfort zone, but in a way that they are also going to be able to achieve success, right? So we always say this, you hear it a lot of like the language you put out in the world of the first two things we hear in a program are, this is hard and it's not fair. That's my favorite one, right?
Yeah.
Because they've never had to do something like this before. And when I say something like this, I mean that, we do a hands-on interactive lesson in our projects. So we go over the subject we're going to explore. So if we're talking about circuits, we're doing the basics of circuitry. We're talking about electrons and how they repel through a circuit. You got to have positive and negative. What's conductive? What's an insulator? How does that have to, be in a circle? And how does that have to be connected to operate? So they're getting that base information so that they can, engage with whatever project is connected to that. But in an in-person format, it's a little bit different in digital, and I could talk about how we've adjusted to maintain that productive struggle opportunity in a digital space. But in an in-person format, they then go onto their build, and they build from a completed example and a full table of materials. So we don't do step-by-step instructions, right? We might do like key tips, right? If you've never stripped a wire before, I'm not going to be like, just figure it out.
Right.
I'll help you out with that part of it. But they're having to, look at something through a critical lens of the information they just received, break that into its smaller components, and then build for themselves, right? And they have an object with that is also the ability to have creativity and development of that, because there's an objective, right? So say we're building an art bot, connect the circuit, make sure it stands up and it moves. But beyond that, I don't care if it has 8 markers or 20 markers or whatever you want to do, you put the battery pack in a different way, whatever works. And the beauty is that they all look different at the end of it, which is amazing, but they all function. But the first time kids do that and have never done that before, they stand next to you and literally go, I do not know what to do. Like, you didn't give me a step. I don't know how to break this down. And so a lot of what we do in a classroom environment is coaching, right? So we're going over and saying, okay, tell me 2 things you can see. Okay, you can see that there's a wire off the battery pack and a wire off the motor, and they're connected. Okay, so let's go and complete that step. And so you're teaching them to think critically. You're giving them the skills to break down a problem. And with those skills come confidence, and come the journey of the fact that by the end of that class, they've got a functioning project, right? They might want to change it or tweak it, but it's functioning. And then we have that cheesy conversation to go back and be like, remember when you told me it was hard? Right?
Right.
Remember you told me it wasn't fair? Look what you did, right? And so, and that starts to build, and it gets maintained. And that's also where, consistency of engagement is also really important. We're not a one and done shop. You don't come and see us and then never see us again. We're really working to build that skill set over that timeline with our participants.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned pivoting a bit with the remote learning and everything like that. I mean, can you talk a little bit about how you've adapted and what your, let's say what your short-term plans are as well?
Yeah, I mean, our short-term terms of the beauty of kind of this pivot that we've made is actually it's developed additional kind of accessibility in the long term, even when we return to quote unquote normal. And if you could see me, I have air quotes around that, right? Whatever that may be. But essentially, we looked at it through a couple of different lenses when we knew we needed to respond. And initially, the first thing we did is okay, we knew we had access to YouTube and Instagram and all those kind of mechanisms, and our newsletter with our participants, and so we started producing content, right? And said, here's things you can do with materials you have at home. Grab the milk out of the fridge and let's explore surface tension or whatever that may be in terms of access.
Yeah.
And from that, we then listened to our community partners, right? So our big goal is to be accessible in the communities we serve. And we do that by partnering with organizations who are, established in meeting community needs. And what we very quickly, discussed, and when I say quickly, I mean within like a week of the first piece of content going up, we established that asking somebody to take milk out of their fridge and explore surface tension wasn't a reasonable ask for a family who was now picking up food distribution,
Right.
or had been picking up food distribution. And so with that, we then went, okay, now how do we respond to that? And we built STEM kits. So we put all the materials needed to complete a range initially of 6 projects into a box. And then we looked at, okay, if milk itself was an access issue, how do we additionally adapt that? And so we did printed instructions in English and Spanish. And then we also made on-demand videos that meant that if your internet connectivity wasn't working at a particular time, you could get it whenever it was, because the video existed there forever. You could also read the instructions. And then as it continually evolved, it also had the opportunity to come and join us for a virtual office hours to kind of pinpoint and target build components. And then that's evolved into additionally being this kind of hybrid model of we distribute kits and then we do a synchronous instruction for an hour virtually online. And the way that we've built in that productive struggle component is that, okay, sending home a kit of materials to kids, we couldn't build completed examples for the hundreds of children we were serving, and we would have been working all day long. But asking them to, figure it out when they had no completed example to examine also wasn't reasonable.
Yeah.
So what we did is usually in an in-person format, our 3rd through 8th grade classes are 2 hours in length. And we were like 2 hours online is crazy. Like, it's like I am as an adult can't retain that long, let alone a 3rd grader. And so we cut it to an hour virtually. And so we did that same interactive lesson. And when I say still interactive, I mean, we sent home, bottles and balloons so they could do a chemical reaction at home, and then do the build of their lava lamp or whatever it was. And we did step-by-step instructions, but we only had half an hour to get through it, right? And so we did like key components of the build, right? So if we were doing art bots, to come back to that again, we were making sure that they knew how to strip the wire, right? That they knew that the motor had to be secure so it wasn't going to fly off the thing, right? Or whatever we were looking at. And then we had those videos and those instructions and those office hours, and we communicated heavily. I mean, super, super heavily with parents and with kids alike to say, the expectation is not that you are done when you click end meeting. Okay. That's not the expectation. The expectation is that you take the time to get to completion before the next time we meet. Yeah. And then we'll support you along the way. And so that enabled them to still have that productive struggle. And believe me, so the interesting part of it is kids who had been alumni of ours, who had been in programs, adapted to that pretty quickly. Kids who were brand new to us, who we'd only met virtually for the first time, went through that same process, right? Like the feedback was, this is a lot of steps. You went really fast. Like, what are we going to do? And it took it took 1 or 2 classes, and then they were comfortable. They were comfortable that they didn't have to be done just because that instructor was gone, that they were going to be able to get to completion independently. And they also knew that if they needed it, they could self-advocate and ask for additional support and resources in those office hour times. And so it's constantly evolving. But the beauty of that is, we are always looking to be accessible. And so that means, we're at the community center or the after school program or, wherever kind of the community's meeting. Some kids still don't get to go to that, right? They've got childcare responsibilities or parent responsibilities or something else they have to go home to. Well, we can give them a kit as they get off the bus, right?
Right.
And
Right.
potentially have an online opportunity, and that opens new windows that just weren't open before.
That's great. And so glad that you're and great that you were able to make that pivot and go virtual when this is still a critical thing. How do you measure success? I mean, what is success in your eyes?
Yeah, I mean, so there's long term and short term, right? So us as an organization, we exist to increase women's participation in STEM fields and to keep them there. And look to build the skill sets, the opportunities, and the pipeline support for that to happen, right? So that's a long term. We got to wait for numbers to see
Yeah.
how that all
Yeah.
turns out, and it's us plus many others working towards that goal.
Right.
But in the short term, it's so there's quantitative and qualitative kind of components of the way that we measure engagement. And, quantitatively, we're looking at, general survey feedback that kids are engaged. We're looking at re-engagement rate, which is well over 60% of us. And we have 300 kids on the wait list. So that's re-engagement while still serving more kids, right?
Yeah.
Which is
Yeah.
constant. And so making sure that they're coming back. We're looking at, the evolution of that conversation of it being hard to, hey, I can do this stuff, additional uptake in additional STEM programs. There's multitudes of ways that we're measuring that in the short term.
Yeah.
Qualitatively, it's getting the feedback from a parent saying, my kid never wanted to do this before and she's obsessed. Or my kid's confidence has increased dramatically because, she knows she can do hard things, or she knows she can do something that isn't innate for her. We're also changing that terminology of hard, right? So
Yeah.
it's not that it's hard or you can't, it's just you've never done it before, right? Or you've never figured out the way you're going to do it, right? And so many kids think that they're not good at a subject because maybe the way that one instructor provided it for them wasn't something that resonated with them. And by being in our programs, they know there's an opportunity to revisit that, right? Try it in a different way, find the way that works for them, because we can all get there. It's just figuring out what resources or support we need to make that as, best an opportunity as possible.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess in a way, it's the way I think about it. At least is it's teaching people how to learn in a way that they may not be used to learning. What are your thoughts of that?
Yeah, I mean, it's the thing is, so one of the things we do a lot with our kind of corporate partners or people that we're speaking with is we'll say, let's do a program with your adults, right? It
Yeah.
is uncomfortable to not know the answer, right?
Yeah.
And they can go through that same journey and they get to that completion and they feel that pride, right? They feel
Right.
really good about
Right.
themselves that they figured it out. And then the comment is, now imagine if you felt that at 6 and 7
Yeah.
and 8, and where, and what opportunities that opens up, and where, even if not like in terms of like what we typically quantify as success in a space, but just your overall kind of openness to the breadth of opportunity available to you, because you're not shutting yourself out from something because you didn't get it the first time.
Yeah.
And so it's an incredibly empowering learning style because it allows you to adapt, and it allows you to do things that, maybe didn't fit into the box you or society around you tried to build.
Right.
And with that, we get the opportunities for innovation, and we get people working in fields they hadn't been in before, and we get solutions to problems that, nobody even had on their radar because they had no perspective of them. And it's just, we're definitely in the empowerment business, but we're coming at it through, you have these skills require development, and also confidence to be added to that equation.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's switch gears a little bit here and talk about the future of the workforce. So,
Mm-hmm.
some of these girls that are in your programs will enter the workforce soon enough, right? So why is STEM so important to training the future workforce?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of comes back in so many ways to that innovation point, right? Science, technology, engineering, and math are going to be a part of every career you're going to walk into as we, go into modern times, whether you're, curator at a museum and you're creating a digital opportunity for somebody at home, or a digital archive, or kind of whatever it is. If you're a nurse or a doctor, what technology are you engaging with? But these STEM skills, science, technology, engineering, and math, and being able to have them in your tool belt, provide the opportunity, again, for that space for innovation. And my biggest requirement of that future workforce is diversification of that workforce. We solve for things we know, right? We might be able to dig further into them, but everybody carries their own bias of the way that they are approaching an issue. And when we get to diversify the populations of people looking at an issue, right, or looking to solve a problem, or looking to create the next kind of thing we've never seen before, even if it's not a problem that's directly in front of us, but maybe something we didn't even know we could have a solution to,
Yeah.
then we have not only more innovation, but we have innovation that works for more people, and that is more accessible as a whole. And that I'm just excited for what that looks like, for, the generations coming behind us. And just in terms of both, exciting opportunities, who knows what that looks like, but also from, through an equity lens and through a diversity lens and through we have so much of the populations that we serve and we work with that are untapped, right? And they're just bursting with so many kind of creative opportunities that I can't even describe because I don't know them. But it's just such a huge opportunity that I think is exciting. And I think it's, we have to make sure that there's representation and participation and, not even kind of a safe space for those individuals to thrive.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I see it in everything from, just organizations that have more success, the more diverse their leadership teams are, to reading about artificial intelligence and bias, whether that's, skin color, whether that's gender, whatever that may be. I mean, there's serious implications here, as well as, to your point, serious opportunities for just, more diversity and equity in who gets to benefit from, from opportunities and stuff like that. How do you, I mean, STEM is, there's a lot in there, in those four letters. How do you think, as far as, most of the students that you're working with, they're a few years out from entering the workforce, but how do you keep tabs on where you should be focusing things, and what are your thoughts there, just to try to train that future workforce?
Yeah, I mean, the honest answer is we're constantly evolving it. So, we've locked in that 4 to 14 age group really effectively. And we don't, like I said, we don't see them once and never see them again. I've got girls who I saw when they were itty bitty and are now in high school, and are going and self-identify as a Rosie, right? But more importantly, self-identify that they can do things that are hard, right? Which is the most important part of this, or stuff that's not comfortable for them. And so we're constantly developing that, but we're already starting to see that. We've been operating since 2016. And so we've got girls who are, finding themselves in these new spaces. And so from us as an organization, that also requires us to evolve with them. So we're currently developing a high school program, which actually will look at these kind of Rosie alumni actually becoming instructors with us, and building kind of within their pipeline. It's a great job for a high school and a college. It's a great job for anybody, but it's a great opportunity generally from that end. And also looking at kind of how they can start to apply those skill sets that they developed with us in early elementary and middle school, into, we're looking at, do we approach each community and look to solve a community-based issue through that STEM lens with this cohort of amazing young women who I'm just in awe of every day. And so we're the honest is consistently engaging with them, tracking them, supporting them, and making sure that, if you've been in a Rosie program, you can call somebody from our team and say, hey, like I've written a million high school and college recommendation letters.
Nice.
We're constantly connecting with mentors. And it's very much it's an identity relationship that we're building with this, right? They are Rosie girls, right? That we can do it spirit is part of them. And so we can only hope to expand that and share that with more young women across the country that, they belong here, right? It's not just a space where like they can fit in. It's that, they belong
Right.
here because the opportunities are endless.
Yeah, no, that's a really great way of putting it. Well, one last question before we wrap up here. There's listeners of this podcast from around the world and around the country, and for those that may not be able to participate in Rosie Riveters for one reason or another, what would you suggest in people, helping to achieve the mission that you're working to achieve?
Yeah, I mean, hands-on project-based learning, as much as you can provide it, is always a great opportunity. You can find us online and follow along with us on any of our activities. So you can find us anywhere in the world. Thanks for digital outreach that's
Yeah,
existing in
that's
that
great.
space. But I think my biggest caveat is patience with young kids, right? There's this idea, even us as adults, the expectation is, hey, I said it twice, you should get it. As opposed to maybe I need to readapt the way I'm providing this information or providing a space where each kid has that development and opportunity to really kind of build confidence in themselves. The language we always use is everybody starts as a beginner. And if you're a beginner, you have no direction whatsoever as to how you're getting to a solution or you're solving a problem or whatever that is. And I think if we can all kind of approach things that everybody's a beginner and everybody's experience is a little bit different, we'll have a lot coming through that lens of kind of empathy for educational growth. I think is huge, because if we can have more confident people in the world, I'm only excited for what the future holds.
Absolutely. Well, Brittany, thank you so much for joining the show and sharing what you're doing. For those listening, what's the best way for them to keep up with you and what you're doing?
Yeah, so we're on all your social media friends places. But if you look at our website, which is www.rosiriveters.com, you can find all our social handles from there, from Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. And so we have a full slew and range of content that you can find from there, is in addition to kind of volunteer opportunities and ways to get involved with what we're doing.
Wonderful. Well, again, I'd like to thank Brittany Greer, Executive Director of Rosie Riveters, for joining the show. Thanks for listening to The Agile World with Greg Kihlstrom. See you next week. Thanks again for listening to the Agile World podcast, brought to you by Tech Systems. I'm your host, Greg Kihlstrom. If you enjoyed the show, please take a minute to subscribe on your podcast channel of choice and leave us a rating so that others can find the show more easily. You can learn more and get a copy of my latest book, The Agile Workforce, from my website at theagile.world.